Good afternoon. Welcome to Germantown Mennonite Church. No matter who you are or where you have come from, you are welcome here. Today we gather to celebrate the life of Mark Hallen. We celebrate today the many roles that he played in our lives: a brother, a friend, a mentor, a father figure, a director, a collaborator, and colleague. When Mark learned he was dying in July, he started writing intentionally every day. Sometimes it was about what he hoped for in his last weeks and months. Sometimes it was a rant. Sometimes it was deep, funny, and sad. This is what Mark said in his first email after his diagnosis. "Fall apart in my backyard. This is my new motto. This is what I want this time to be for us. Fall apart in my backyard. I'll be your backyard you can fall apart in. You can be my backyard that I can fall apart in. Let's all fall apart in my backyard. Let's run, fall apart, get up, fall down. Meanwhile, we'll keep dancing in my backyard." Now, this was not a suggestion that we would all cry together about what was happening. His Scandinavian sensibilities were not predisposed to that kind of show of emotion. It was more like, let's practice letting our guard down together. Let's practice taking the mask off and being real with each other. Mark continued in his email, "The point of practicing is this. In the midst of difficulty or imbalance or fearfulness, how long can you stay curious? How long can you stay generous? How long can you stay respectful? How much change and uncertainty can you bear? How much attention can you pay? How many different kinds of attention can you pay? Are you seeing the evidence in reality or in your own head? How true can you be to what's happening right here and now before you blow a gasket, disconnect, reject, judge, defy, repel, repudiate, call it out, name the lie, run away, and then come back?" The poet Rumi said, "Come, come whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times, come. Come again, yet again, come." The service today is an opportunity to practice Mark's motto, "Fall apart in my backyard." Feel all that you are feeling in the safety of this space, filled with people that have been tattooed by the legacy of Mark Hallen. Fall apart in my backyard is why Mark chose to have this memorial service here. I really tried to talk him out of it. I knew that we wouldn't have quite enough space, but it was important to Mark that we be able to see each other today. So if you're sitting on the stage, or if you're downstairs listening, or sitting on the floor, or in a windowsill, if you have to wait in line for the bathroom, know that this was all by design. So that we could all really see each other. So today we'll hear from folks in many areas of Mark's life that will witness to the light we saw in Mark, that will testify to the creative, brilliant man that he was. We'll hear from old friends, from students and faculty at Eastern University, and from Yes and Collaborative Arts, a program he grandfathered, loved, and supported. We'll also hear songs and poems that were chosen by Mark for this occasion. He could not possibly leave this world without a few production notes to leave behind. Fall apart in my backyard. Will you pray with me? Eternal God, we praise you that we live and move and have our being because of you. We thank you for the unending life offered to us in Jesus Christ, that Christ approached death knowing it was not the end, but that resurrection and wholeness were the next step. We thank you for the life of our brother and friend Mark and all that he meant to us, for all those things in his life which gave us glimpses of your goodness and love. Help us today as we release him to you, that our grief may be neither overwhelming or unending. Give us assurances of your love, and may Mark's life strengthen our trust in your grace and peace. Amen.
My name is Laura Hallen Gates, and I am Mark's sister. When Mark was 11 years old, our dad died. And from that time until Mark's death in August, he carried in his wallet a letter that was submitted to the local newspaper back in Massachusetts. When Mark planned this memorial service, ever the director, he asked that I share that letter with you, and if you will bear with me. Scott Paper Company suffered a great loss this week. It didn't happen on the financial pages. It didn't happen on the production line. It happened when we lost one of the finest men in our organization, our plant manager, Norman Hallen. Norm proved every day that top management could be a friend to the little guy. It didn't matter to Norm whether you were the janitor, on the production line, an office worker, or the president of our company. To him, every morning, to everyone, Norm had a cheery hello, and his door was always open. Norm was a man you could talk to, a man you could always trust. Our heartfelt sympathies go out to Norm's wife, his 2 daughters, and his son. Norm will be greatly and sadly missed by every employee of the Scott Paper Company. I think Mark kept this letter in his wallet for all those years, since he was 11 years old, because this was the man Mark wanted to be. This was the man Mark emulated. And to all of us here today, and probably scores of others that couldn't be with us today, this truly was the man my brother became. Thank you so much for being here today with my family and myself.
Now, there are some things we all know. We all know that something is eternal. And it ain't houses, and it ain't names, and it ain't the earth, and it ain't even the stars. Everybody knows in their bones that something is eternal. And that something has to do with human beings. All the greatest people ever lived have been telling us that for 5,000 years. Yet you'd be surprised how people are always losing hold of it. There's something way down deep that's eternal about every human being. Now, you know as well as I do that the dead don't stay interested in us living people for very long. Gradually, they lose hold of the earth and the ambitions they had and the pleasures they had and the things they suffered and the people they loved. They get weaned away from the earth. That's the way I put it. Weaned away. And all that time, the earth part of them burns away. It burns out. And they slowly get indifferent to what's going on here. They're waiting. They're waiting for something that they feel is coming, something important and great. Aren't they waiting for the eternal part of them to come out clear? Now, some of these things maybe will hurt your feelings. That's okay. That's just the way it is. Mother and daughter, husband and wife, enemy and enemy, money and miser, all those terribly important things kind of grow pale around here. And what's left when the memory's gone and your identity?
And I've been here all day. It's too hot to sleep. Time is running away. Feel like my soul has turned into steel. I still got the scars that the sun didn't heal. There's not even room enough to be anywhere. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. Well, my sense of humanity has gone down the drain. Behind every beautiful thing, there's been some kind of pain. She wrote me a letter, and she wrote it so kind. She put down in writing what was in her mind. I just don't see why I should even care. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. Well, I've been to London, and I've been to gay Paris. I've followed the river, and I've got to the sea. And I've been down at the bottom of a whirlpool of lies. I ain't looking for nothing in anyone's eyes. Sometimes my burden seems more than I can bear. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. I was born here and I'll die here, against my will. I know it looks like I'm moving, but I'm standing still. Every nerve in my body is so vacant and numb. I can't even remember what it was I came here to get away from. Don't even hear the murmur of a prayer. It's not dark yet, it's getting there.
My Italian grandmother repeatedly reminded me as a young boy to always wear clean underwear in case I was ever in a kind of accident that resulted in my hospitalization. I never understood this logic. If I was hit by a bus in Queens, dragged 2 city blocks, broken all my bones in my body, would wearing clean underwear at time really matter? I guess some things never seem to make sense, even when you grow up. On behalf of President Robert Duffert, our interim provost Ken Sparks, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. John Pauley, and all the faculty, staff, and administrators and students of Eastern University, I want to extend our deepest condolences on the passing of Professor Mark Hallen, beloved colleague, friend, and thespian. Mark was well cared for and deeply loved, especially during the last few months of his life, by the Eastern University community alumni who were his primary caregivers, affectionately known as Team Hallen. People like Brooke Sexton, Dan Eisen, and Pastor Amy Yoda McLaughlin. And there were many others. But I would like to especially thank someone who I'll appropriately call the captain of the caregivers. And if you're a Yankees fan, the Derek Jeter of the caregivers, although Mark would strongly prefer a Boston Red Sox illustration here. None other than Dr. Betsy Morgan, Professor Emeritus of English and alumnus of Eastern University. Simply, well done, Betsy. Well done. Now I would like to offer just 2 brief memories of Mark. One memory when he was less aware of his own death, the other when he was fully aware of his own death. My first memory. Several years ago, I invited a Christian high school theater group to see one of our fall plays. The high school's theater director at the time attended the same church that I did. I always spoke highly of our theater projects and strongly encouraged this theater group to attend one of the university plays. It happened to be a play that dealt with the impact of war from the Balkan conflict. Unbeknownst to me, there was some very colorful language used in the play by the actors. Now, the high school group attended the Friday night performance. I could not attend with them due to a prior commitment, so I attended the Saturday evening performance. Oh, the play was gritty, provocative, and intellectually and spiritually engaging. However, when I went to church the next morning, the high school theater director cornered me in the lobby and pointedly said, "I must really say, Joe, that Eastern University play was the most vulgar thing I've ever experienced." I thought to myself, the most vulgar thing ever? I didn't know how to respond. A long pause ensued, and then I rambled something that even to this day, I don't know where it came from. I said, well, you know, it's vulgar in the right ways. Well, I told this to Mark on Monday morning when I returned to campus. I was a bit concerned, but he smiled and laughed. He seemed to take it as a glowing compliment. A few weeks passed, and Mark asked me to stop by his office. He said, Joe, I think we may have a new slogan for our theater program here at Eastern University. And then he proceeded to show me the new official letterhead that he designed. And on it said, in vulgus vias rectus. Now, my Latin was a little rusty from my altar boy days, so I said to Mark, what does this mean? He says, I think it means vulgar in the right ways. I said, do you want to check the translation, perhaps with a Latin scholar? Maybe even have a discussion with the dean before you print it on official university letterhead. And then Mark pointed over his shoulder to these reams of paper that were in the corner of his office. It seemed that Mark had already ordered the letterhead. Only Mark Hallen could sense that vulgar could be done in the right ways. My second memory. During one of my early summer visits with Mark, when he was still mobile but very ill, we decided to have lunch at a wonderful restaurant near the corner of his block. I met him at his apartment. We slowly walked down his flight of stairs, and as we stepped foot onto Lancaster Avenue in West Philly, Mark abruptly stopped me. He said, Joe, take a look across the street. What do you see? At first, I saw what appeared to be an office building that looked condemned and was boarded up with plywood. Then Mark continued to say, that's the place where Dr. Herman Gosnell did all those horrible things. And I said, somewhat flabbergasted, I said, you mean you live right across the street from that clinic there? Then Mark said, huffing and puffing, repositioning his nasal cannula and portable oxygen tank, and do you see all the stickers, Joe, that are on the boarded up wood? I stepped off the curb a little bit, nearly got hit by a car, but into the street for a closer look. I said, yes, Mark, I do. He said, these are the dreams from the neighborhood people so that after the clinic was closed, what might become of this horrible place. Then Mark paused, and Joe, that's what the gospel is really about. And then we ate hot turkey meatball hoagies, drank iced tea, and had a few laughs. I think Mark really understood an often neglected part of the gospel, that imagining of something becoming a new creation. Mark was confident that God could take horrible things done one day and make a new creation the next day. And perhaps that is what theater making at Eastern University is all about. Mark's final production, one that no one knew would be his last, was Thornton Wilder's Our Town. An American classic, a story of life, death, hope, and dreams about beginnings and endings, and knowing what's really real. Near the end of the play, Act 3, there is a famous exchange by two characters in the play. In some ways, it's the thesis statement of Wilder's play. It's between Emily Webb Gibbs, and I see Alicia and Erin, who played that role, are here. Arguably, that is the main character, and the stage manager, we heard from Brett in his monologue, who serves as the narrator. But the key here is that Emily has died and speaks from the afterlife. Emily says, do any human beings ever realize life when they live it? Every minute? Stage manager, no. The saints and poets, maybe, they do some. I think Mark might consider himself somewhat out of a poet, but never a saint. But I think if we look at G.K. Chesterton had Mark in mind when he offered this understanding of sainthood. A saint is one who exaggerates what the world neglects. Thanks, Mark, for exaggerating the things we needed to see, hear, and experience during your theater making at Eastern University. And let me close with another Latin phrase, requiescat in pace, may he rest in peace.
This is from Julius Caesar. Cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once. Of all the wonders that I yet have heard, it seems to me most strange that men should fear, seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come. I'm here to tell a story, but I don't. It's not much of a story. It's just more of a snapshot, a memory of Mark. Probably the first time he was really burned into my brain and existence. It was the first actors lab, I think, that I was attending, and one of the things we were doing was some yoga, which, I mean, to many of us now, it doesn't seem like such a big deal, but at the time, I had learned somewhere that yoga was something you didn't want to do because it opened you up to evil spirits. Like really, like you didn't do yoga because that was an Eastern thing. And I'm like, where did I hear that? I really have no idea, but like, why not the Holy Spirit? But not. So Mark was doing some poses, and at one point he was showing us the plow pose, which, as some of you may know, involves your legs right up over your head. And so here's this middle-aged man, not in particularly good shape, like showing us this pose, and he's got his legs over his head, and at some point, he's sort of explaining, and then he just took a moment to breathe and went, that's delicious. And the memory of that, who I was in that moment, coming out of my own family in a fairly judgmental, moderately judgmental Christianity, not even that judgmental, was, with all my fears and repressions and complacency, was encountering someone who seemed to be without fear, or at least was not acting on any of that fear. And, of ridicule, of looking ridiculous. And that was Mark. He never seemed to act on any of those fears that he had, like we all have, meaninglessness, of powerlessness, and ultimately even of death. And here was this man expecting me right in that moment and over and over and over again, like so many of us, expecting me to be and live without fear. And as many of you who probably cringed the first time he asked you to do the space rebound, that's sort of like a microcosm of many, many experiences. Whether you liked him or not, Mark engaged all of us, I think, with his full self, passionate about faith and art and all the difficult parts of life that these exist to touch and heal, expecting us to be as passionate and interested in them as they deserve. I was struck by this again when I watched him with the cast of Three Sisters, which I was so lucky to come and be a part of. He never talked down to us. As college students, we are green, naive in many ways, but to Mark, we are always fully human, just capable of meeting the deep questions and conundrums in life and art, deeply interesting and worthy of examination in our foibles and inconsistencies. And this is what I will miss most about Mark. And I was going to say, for myself and more for all the students who won't get to work and play with him like we did, but I don't think I want to say that, because looking around at all of us who were touched and inspired by him, we will go on, hopefully, to inspire others. So not to focus on what might have been, but to celebrate Mark for who he was and what he meant to all of us. Thank you.
I was asked to tell a story, and I thought about it a lot. And I couldn't really land on anything that encapsulated what I'm feeling in this moment. And if there is anything that I learned from Mark over the last 10 years or so, is when you don't know what to say, let Chekhov speak for you. And I thought it might be fitting to send Mark off with a little bit of Chekhov. And I will let him speak for me today. This is the end of Uncle Vanya. You and I, Uncle Vanya, we have to go on living. The days will be slow and the nights will be long, but we'll take whatever fate sends us. We'll spend the rest of our lives doing other people's work for them. We won't know a minute's rest, and then when our time comes, we'll die. And when we're dead, we'll say that our lives were full of pain, that we wept and suffered, and God will have pity on us. And then, dear Uncle Vanya, we'll see a brand new life, all shining and beautiful. We'll be happy. And we'll look back on the pain we feel right now and we'll smile. And then we'll rest. I believe that, Uncle. I believe that with all my heart and soul. Then we'll rest. We'll hear the angels singing. We'll see the diamonds of heaven. And all our earthly woes will vanish in a flood of compassion that overwhelms the world. And then everything will be calm, quiet, gentle as a loving hand. Wait a while, just a little while, Uncle Vanya, and you and I will rest. We will. I know we will. We'll rest. I know we will.
Places I remember all my life, though some have changed, some for better, not forever. Some have gone, and some remain. All these places have their moments. With lovers and friends, I still can recall. Some are dead and some are living. In my life, I've loved them all. But of all these friends and lovers, there is no one compares with you, and these memories lose their meaning when I think of love as something new. Oh, I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before. I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I've loved you more. Mark always said people come to the theater to see the sets fall down. And how we would handle it. Oh, I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before. I know I'll often stop and think about them in my life. I loved you more. In my life, I loved you more.
Obviously, this isn't one of the sets that I built. Good to see you all here. Mark Hallen was a teacher, a mentor, a good friend, and a crusader. I met Mark in July of 2002. I was working for Plan Ops at the time for almost a month, barely then. And I was introduced to Mark because I had a lot of theater experience on my resume, and my boss thought I might be interested in helping out with the theater department. So he kind of set up a meet and greet, so to speak. Well, to my surprise, it was an interview. I walked into the back door of the theater, and I said hello, and I sat down, and he looked at my resume, and then he looked at me, and then he said, "You want a job?" And that was it, and obviously we all know my answer was, so since then, we've been known as the two Marks. Either he or I was the other Mark, or as I would like to say, we were Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. So, theater for Mark wasn't just a hobby or even a passion. It was his life's work. It was his calling. He never slighted the process, and he never compromised his art. The themes of making art that matters or telling stories that transform meant something on many levels to Mark. It was just not about the plays and the stories that he directed or produced. It was about transforming the students into more caring and loving, understanding human beings. The students themselves were the stories that transformed. They were the art that mattered. He had strong convictions about the kind of stories he wanted to tell. They were about opening up the dialogue to issues that most people didn't want to discuss. They were stories to get the students to ask questions and find motivation within themselves, to tell the stories with confidence and integrity. This didn't only happen on the stage, but with the lives of the people around him in his everyday life. Mark would always take time to listen and encourage people to do what was right in their hearts and to always go for it. Mark had a way of assessing people's strengths and ambitions and help them find motivation to act even when they themselves couldn't see it or didn't trust what they had in them. he was a great conversationalist, let's say. Nothing was ever out of bounds. Politics? Yup. Religion? Hell yeah. Gossip? All the time. Sometimes almost getting us kicked out of Teresa's. And stories, lots of stories. He made time for conversation even if he didn't actually have the time, which made him chronically late about almost for everything. He had a way of making people feel uncomfortable at first, sort of digging in, but then gain their trust and then set them at ease. Someone say, you just have to get used to it. But once you did, you had a friend and a champion for life. Mark was the opposite of a snob, let's say. His outside appearances didn't matter to him, as evidenced by his own appearance. He could see inside you and understand that some of the most valuable things among us didn't have to be fancy clothes or fancy titles, but that they were interesting ones, the ones that made this world work. By the way, he had 2 MFAs. He wanted to know their stories and make them feel noticed and acknowledged, from the servers who brought his favorite beverages to the person behind the counter, or even the person in the kitchen, and to the crazy dude across the street. No one was ever beneath him. If anything, I think Mark tried to put himself down beneath everyone else, like some sort of strange social experiment. He'd push himself down and then lift them up, giving them confidence and getting them to feel better about themselves. The food and drink always overflowed with Mark. Anyone who spent time with Mark outside of the theater knows that Mark was a bit of a food and drink connoisseur. Not necessarily that he loved good food and drink, although he did, but that at times he liked lots of both. And anything was possible when good food and drink and company were around. Some of our best conversations were over a few drinks, and some of our best ideas were formed from the conversations we had in that type of atmosphere. And I have the receipts to prove it. In the past, people have asked me if all that work that went into a production made me tired, and if I ever had enough of it. Well, I always say no. Mark would wear you down, but then lift you up. He made you live the process, and so it made you part of the result. He was the ultimate collaborator. He sought out people who were willing and motivated to make something special, those without pretense, or what we like to call the diva complex. Anyone was welcome in our family, as long as they were willing to lay it all on the line. For those that took the risk, he made them understand that they were part of something bigger, that they themselves are bigger than themselves, He pushed people through a painful process, but always reminded them that any pain and all of the risk was far outweighed by the reward in the end. There would be times that you felt small, but that he would make you bigger and better and stronger than you ever knew you could be. It was all really about the people. The people were the process. His greatest production was the one that he lived every day. Through it all, it was always about trying to create better human beings, getting people to look into themselves and find the humanity and the decency so that they could look the world in the eyes and pay it forward. Teach others to go within. Lead by example. Not be content with the status quo. Ask the hard question. Make a difficult decision. Be afraid to do something and do it anyway. That is his legacy. The students and the colleagues and the friends who found themselves through him. The many, many people that he moved through his art and that are now moving through others. People in this room, look around you. Mark is moving through all of us today and tomorrow. We have yet to know how this play will end, and he left us to strike the final scene. and He is trusting us to make it awesome. I'm sure He wanted us to include some kind of projection or PowerPoint. So with that, off we go, right? I would just like to end with a quote from St. Francis of Assisi. It's kind of a parting gift that Mark gave me. He gave me a great little thing. And it says, "He who works with his hands is a laborer. He who works with his hands and his head is a craftsman. And he who works with his hands and his head and his heart is an artist."
You're not always start of each summer camp or winter school, Mark would sit our kids down on the edge of the stage after this, and he would welcome them to his house. He would tell them how happy he was that they were there, they don't have rules, and he'd tell them if they needed something to let him know, and then he'd disappear. Until he reappeared with popsicles, strawberries, or some other snack for the kids. And in the early days of summer theater camp, he would have us to his house. He'd fire up the grill. Yes. And then we'd share his bourbon and his songs on the porch. Nearer to the end of his life, he made a point of cleaning up his West Philly apartment, of doing a little decorating, hanging some curtains, trying to make sure that his guests were comfortable. He gathered folks there for readings of beer, and he made a point of stocking the fridge with good wine, chocolate, hummus, lots and lots of beer. Mark was our host. He was host to us all. And the legacy that he leaves to Yes and is that art of hosting. In doing it for us, he taught us how to create and hold space for others to come into their own, for others to develop into the fullest expression of themselves. Because the space he held wasn't just about hospitality. It was about inviting us to run as fast as we possibly could toward our best self. And do it by running as fast as we possibly could toward one another. He did it with beer butt chicken, and jalapeno poppers, and popsicles on Fridays. He did it with chocolate and hand sanitizer. He did it by teasing and prodding and mocking at times. He did it with obsession and nicknames. He did it with a genius that often seemed like anything but genius, until the very last one. He did it with a fierceness and wit and generosity, and he did it with love. He taught us to be host to the playing and the making and the discovery, by being host to the playing and making of this world. And so as his children and as his grandchildren, we humbly and with honor play home.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I was reading over a couple of random notes in the books that I had of just Mark's scrawl recently. And I read something that said, like, dive in, clean it all, prepare well, and then enter a room and just let it happen. So I've prepared, and I was like, I have 5 stories in my pocket that I'll maybe see which one sounds best to tell. And I'm still not sure which story I want to share with you guys. And I know Liz is like, yeah, that's really hard. It's really hard to figure out what story to share with you. But one thing that I know is true is that Mark was a damn good teacher. He was a really good teacher. I remember I walked into his office January of 2011 for my performance theory class, and I was the only student. I was like, are we gonna cancel the class? Are we still doing this thing? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And he was like, how was your winter break? I was like, oh my goodness, I went to this retreat and I learned this really cool thing. It's called improvisational theology, and I was really stoked about it. And he was just like, cool, let's learn about that for this semester. And for my whole entire semester, I learned about this thing that neither of us knew much about. And he would insert some lessons every now and then of this is performance and you need an audience and actors, and not necessarily actors, but a relationship. And we studied together. I felt like I would come into class, and sometimes he'd answer the phone and say, "This is Eva Hall's office. What do you need?" Which I'm sure he did for everyone. The office always changed. I loved it. And I learned and gleaned and realized that yes and is a language that can be learned. This idea of having offers and giving people offers. And the biggest offer I think Mark always gave to me was the opportunity to come and play. Let's go play. Let's go and lay down and stretch and then play the crap out and just enjoy being present with other bodies in a space. And I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed that space and being able to just play like a 6-year-old again. It was so good. Loved it. But just being able to be invited into a space and have nonverbal communication that seemed to be the deepest communication I sometimes had in the week was a really cool thing that we got out of being in Actors Lab. So that's my tidbit. My zest, my peppering, my spice that I feel like Mark has, like Amy said, tattooed me with, is the idea that play is beautiful at any age and should be granted and given to anyone, whether you are 6, whether you're 26, whether you're poor, homeless, or wealthy and a CEO. You should give anybody the opportunity to get down and dirty every now and then, and to just remind yourself that we are all equal on this level of recreating and being part of recreation with each other. So that's my smattering of Mark for you all, and that is what I can give to you all today. Thank you.
Back in 2003, I was a closeted gay kid at Eastern. And here was Mark Hallen doing the Laramie Project. It was clear right then, and it remains as clear as ever now, that Mark was an author of truth and a proud parent of ideas. Since then, Mark's been my boss, teacher, mentor, friend, collaborator, champion, and fellow baseball result bemoaner. I think he's been all of those things to just about everyone here. What a phenomenal capacity he had. Navigating all those relationships with such enthusiasm and such care. One time I showed Mark a poem called To Marcus Aurelius, and he really liked it, especially the part where it says, "Give me your hand across the dark." Ever since then, just about every time I saw Mark in the hallway or on the phone or wherever, I'd holler, "Marcus Aurelius!" So I'll read that poem now in memory of an author of truth and a proud parent of ideas. Good night, Marcus. Put out the light and shut the book. For overhead is raised a gold alarm of stars. Heaven is talking some foreign tongue. This, the barbarian cry of fear, your Latin cannot understand. Terror, continuous dark terror, against the fragile human land begins to beat. It's winning. Hear its roar. The unrelenting stream of elements will drown your prose until the world's four walls go down. As for us, to tremble in the air, blow in the ashes, stir the ether, gnaw our fingers, seek vain words, drag off the fallen shades behind us. Well, Marcus, better hang up your piece. Give me your hand across the dark. Let it tremble when the blind world beats on senses 5 like a failing lyre. Traitors, universe and astronomy, reckoning of stars, wisdom of grass, and your greatness too immense. And Marcus, my defenseless tears.
Fly away. I am slain by a fair maid. My shroud of white. My shroud of white shall go with you. My part in death, no one so true. Come away, and inside Cyprus let me be laid. Not a flower on my black coffin let there be strewn. Not a friend, my poor body where bones shall be thrown. 1,000 sighs to say, sad true lover, ne'er find my grave. Come away, and inside Cyprus let me be laid.
Save me a piece of candy, Brooke. Hello, my name is Catherine Peterson, and I am a friend of Mark's. I want to give you a few facts about his life prior to Eastern College, if I may, and then a few impressions. In 1977, a very auburn-haired, long-haired, I don't know if he had his beard yet then. I don't think so, no. Young man came from Granby, Massachusetts to the evangelical mecca of Wheaton College in Illinois. Imagine Bob Dylan hitting a Midwest Christian college. What's that? With red hair, yes, of course. Mark met Jim Young. Many of you have heard of Jimma, I'm sure, in your stories, and Jim Young became his mentor and many of our mentors, and a lot of the stories you're telling about Mark, I am deeply moved because many of those things we experienced, Mark and I, coming in 1977 and 1978, the old guy doing the plow, you know, and saying this is delicious, you know. There's a classic image that is up on Facebook right now, but it's an image of Mark, I think probably as a sophomore and junior in college, wrestling with Jim Young. And Jim was in his tie-dye pants, and they're wrestling, and it often reminds me of Jacob wrestling with the angel. And then the more I thought about it today, I thought, no, it's really about the older Jacob wrestling with the younger Jacob. Jimma, after Mark visited with Jimma in 2006, his health was declining. Mark wrote me saying that it was hard to say goodbye. My last father is going. We had a workout group that was very much like your actor's lab, as I'm hearing the stories. And yes, we did the mirrors, space rebounds, all of those things as well. And that's where we became an ensemble. And as you then know, those of you from Actors Lab, you know what it's like to have created that family with someone. And we all became a family together. In 1979, Mark went to Amsterdam, and in the summer, he was part of, oh, hello. He was part of the youth hostel ministry there, and so he worked in a youth hostel in a red light district. And that was a profound experience for him, so much so he went back in the fall of 1980, yes, the fall of 1980, and spent on his own accord 3 more months there. It opened him up spiritually, it opened him up to seeing the world and what real issues in the world were outside of the bubble. And got him clearer, I think, in many ways on his focus and his trajectory with his art. He had to make some choices after that, and he decided to keep pursuing this path of theater. He graduated from Wheaton in 1982 and went into one of his 2 MFAs, yes, his acting program at SMU. He was there till 1985. He graduated from there and then headed to New York City. He was in New York. He acted in some Shakespeare festivals. For those of you who only know Mark as a director, he was quite an actor. He had many of the lead roles at Wheaton and then went on professionally, you know. So, but he decided that his real path was directing and then teaching. In 1988, he taught at Wheaton while Jimma was on sabbatical. And during that time, he and I got to co-found the Muse Theater Company. We worked out of Wheaton for about 2 summers, and then he went on to get his MFA, the second MFA, at Iowa, and I brought Muse here to Philadelphia. And those of you who know Yes and the umbrella parent company, Resources for Human Development, Muse was
we found resources for human development at that point and started working in North Philly. And Mark and Darla came back to Philly and set up their home here. And we worked creating original pieces with a group of adult artists with young people in the inner city, based on myth and their current stories. It was a remarkable experience. It was some of the most profound art-making experience I've ever had as a theater artist, and I so understand the importance of what you're doing, all of you who are makers in Yes and. Now, Muse went from that time to about 94, 95, and then when did Mark start at Eastern? 92? There you have it. So you guys have taken the ball from Eastern on. What I want to tell you personally is this. This morning I spent several hours, I have a binder of letters, lots and lots of letters from those years. We didn't have email. So I have tangible proof, baby. We wrote letters across the country, across continents. And we were very close. And as I reread these letters this morning, things fell out of the letters. Comics, articles from the Boston Globe on what it meant to be red-haired, objects from his driveway in Granby, Massachusetts. And this, a dime wrapper, right? And on the back it says, Polish condom. That was for you, Mark. I think you would have liked that. He would have liked that red here. Early on, Mark named me. Like he probably gave you all names, right? Nicknames. Well, early on in 1978, I got a nickname from Mark Hallen. And my name is Catherine Peterson, and he called me J. Catherine Peterson because my brother Randy Peterson is really J. Randall Peterson, and he just wanted to keep the Peterson legacy going. So I lost you again. Okay, I became J. Catherine Peterson, or JKP, but that was only the beginning because on all these letters I have the real bastardizations of my name, right? Wait for it. J. Sickly Peterson, Jersey Cookie, thank you. Kastinka Peterson, Katrinka Stinkhead Petersnot, J.K. of the Rinky Dinky Petersons, and the penultimate, J. Katrinka Omaha Peter Duder Sneedersnot. So this morning, from all these letters and notes and emails, because I did keep some of the emails too, I've been reconnected with a Mark that I had lost lately. And this is the Mark that I knew. I knew him to be a true clown, the pure, ooh. He's doing this, isn't he? Yeah. He was the pure clown. On the outside of one of the letters he wrote me, it said, lift stamp off for secret message. And when you lift the stamp off, it said fart. But you see, I wouldn't I wouldn't put it past him to actually have aimed his fart at that. So Mark was a clown in the purest sense. Mark, as we all know, many of us know, he was a provocateur. He could punch you, slap you, twist you, poke you, find the wound in you. And he often did. And sometimes he did it to be cruel or mean, straight up. Sometimes he did, I think. And sometimes he did it to teach you something, and to teach you something about life or love or himself. Mark was a searcher. He searched all his life, and a questioner. He earnestly sought to know God. He diligently sought experience and truth. And Mark was a lover. He cherished delicately, and he cherished brashly. He wanted to know and be known by those he loved. And finally, I notice on the back of your programs, there's this inventory by Dorothy Parker, and I think Mark would really like it if we all read it chorally. So read it with me, if you would. Inventory by Dorothy Parker. For be the things I am wiser to know, idleness, sorrow, a friend and a foe. For be the things I've been better without, love, curiosity, freckles, and doubt. 3 be the things I shall never attain, envy, content, and sufficient champagne. 3 be the things I shall have till I die, laughter and hope and a sock in the eye.
This spring, when Mark was in the hospital, he asked me to be his pastor. I considered this to be an honor and a surprise. He had a complicated relationship with the church, with theology, and with religion. Complicated is a word that describes Mark in most areas of his life. Mark was not the type of guy to like definitive answers or certainty or conclusions. He liked questions, process, and all of the difficult, messy stuff that happened before someone made a decision. Mark approached the notice of his death with this same complicated spirit. He was not especially interested in trying to have his personal and professional life wrapped up neatly in a pretty little package. He was content to know that somewhere on the other side of this life, all of it would be figured out. Now, while complicated is a good word to describe Mark, there was also a certainty to him. As he learned about his diagnosis in July, Mark was clear. He was not going to fight what was happening to his body. Instead, he wanted to be surrounded by friends as he enjoyed every moment of the remaining days of his life. Here's the other complicated thing about Mark. While he gave off an air of curmudgeonly disinterest, he was a man full of love and generosity. Brooke told me this morning that this summer he ordered 3 umbrellas on Amazon Prime. He kind of had an Amazon Prime addiction this summer. But this was after he knew he would never go outside again. He had umbrellas at the door ready if someone needed one. He spoke of his students as if they were his own children, and offered them love and a listening ear during difficult college years. I think the number of students, past and present, here today is a testimony to the impact that he had. In July, when I told my own kids that Mark was dying, my daughter made him a picture that said, "I will miss going to Taco Bell with you." Now, this was a not-so-secret tradition that she and Charlie had developed with Mark, and one that I vocally disapproved of. When I gave the picture to Mark, he looked it over several times. He picked it up, examined it, smiled, set it down, and then a few minutes later, as we had moved on in the conversation, he did it again. He did this over and over in the course of a long conversation. Finally, he asked me to hang it in his living room. He'd show it to people when they came in to visit, and then he'd tell them about my daughter's involvement in Yes and in Eastern's theater productions. Now, this was not something that he did just for my daughter. He did that for all of his students. If I have heard about one of you, I have heard about all of you. He would share with pride the accomplishments of his students because his love for you was deep and parental. Behind that red and gray beard and buried under the Boston Red Sox hat was a deeply compassionate and generous man, a very human and complicated man. Now, Mark would be mad if I made my eulogy too simplistic or put him in too positive a light. So I'm going to try not to romanticize him any more than I have. I'll only leave you with this. Mark loved all of you in his own imperfect way. His life did not resolve like a rom-com. It ended in the spirit of one of his favorite movie directors, Ingmar Bergman. Bergman, at his death, left several scripts, half-written, and notes for many more scripts yet to be realized. Mark's notes are written on you, his students, on Eastern University's theater department, and on the programs of Yes and Collaborative Arts. These undeveloped ideas of a complicated man are left for us to realize. The rest of it will be figured out on the other side of this life.
To the nth degree. This song in particular, he demanded was played for you guys. I think this was his last way of trying to carry all of us.
What's that song? Can be sung by two. A broken home, a broken heart, isolated and afraid. Gotta get it through to you. You're not alone. always the same. A broken dream, a broken heart, isolated and afraid. Open up, this is a raid. I gotta get it through to you. You're not alone. I gotta get it through to you. You're not alone.
Let us pray. You have heard the prayers of your people today, O God, in the words of poetry, in the songs of tribute, and in the heartfelt sharing. These words and songs reflect your people's deep love for their brother Mark and for the ways that he showed us a glimpse of you. We have remembered Mark with our eulogies, our stories, our songs and poetry. Help us continue to remember Mark as we share hospitality, act with generosity, love each other deeply, and collaborate in the way that Mark taught us. Into your hands, eternal God, we commend Mark Hallen. Receive him, we ask, a sheep of your fold, a lamb of your flock, a beloved child of your care. Receive Mark into the arms of your mercy, into the company of your saints, and into everlasting peace. Amen.
What an amazing backyard this has been today. This is called From Mark in Memory. Mercy, her name is Mercy, spilled like salty wind along the dunes. Sea grass breathes her benediction. She sits alone beside you. Often I think I hear her voice, then a gesture, one that only you would recognize. Mercy like bitty hens clucking soft. Mercy like the splash of rock wall waterfall. Lord have, she will carry you in her womb. Christ have, she knows the beat of your heart. Lord have, her tears will sing for you. Mercy.
Thank you all for being here today, for celebrating Mark. I invite you downstairs now for a dessert and snacks and continue our storytelling. There are also a lot of pictures downstairs that you really should see. Go in peace.